Hello and welcome to the DraftKings Daily Trot. I'm Big Italy 42 here talking about tonight's 9-game slate of action. And as we've seen quite often recently, there's no obvious chalk pitcher. A couple of guys that are certainly in play though. Garrett Richards, $10,500 at home against Baltimore. Just 7-run total here, and he's a minus 150 favorite coming off his best start of the season where he went 7 1/3 against the Indians. Did give up 4 earned runs, but had 11 strikeouts. Had a complete game 4 games ago as well. So he's a guy who's been giving up some runs, but at the same time, he's also facing off against a Baltimore team that strikes out over 22% of the time against righties. So no slam dunk obvious play here, but I think he kind of stands at the top for me. Another guy's really interesting, Steven Strasburg. We know the inconsistencies he's shown. Hasn't pitched since July 4th, but in his last rehab start, faced 21 batters. Struck out 11 of them. So we know the upside he possesses. Not sure that he's a cash game play here, but we know the Rockies, a terrible offense on the road, not nearly the offense they are at home. So he certainly has the highest upside of anybody on the slate tonight. Tyson Ross is a huge favorite, minus 200. Against the Philly offense, it's actually been pretty good recently. And Tyson Ross, if you look, though, only has eclipsed 20 DraftKings points in one of his last 7 starts. So kind of concerning there. We know he's a guy who struggles with walks, but he does keep the ball on the ground. Doesn't allow very many home runs. In fact, only Lucas Duda's hovered off of him, I believe, in the last 2 months. He's one of the best in the game at keeping the ball in the park. Low total, he's a big favorite. I think he's a fine cash game play, but I don't love the price tag. I don't think he has a lot of upside at 10-6 against this team. It's actually been hitting pretty well. I mentioned the walk struggles, so... Next up, we've got Trevor Bauer against Minnesota. Minnesota is actually the worst road offense in baseball. They did explode last night. Huge performance. We had a slugfest in Cleveland. Wind blown in a little bit here. Bauer, we know, has good stuff. He's a guy with some upside with a strikeout rate. Walks almost 10% of batters, which you don't like, but you do like the 23.5% strikeout rate for him. So good and bad with him. I think he's certainly a guy that's in play. Not necessarily a cash game play for me. Jeff Samardzija is only $8,600. He's facing off against Kansas City. Hasn't shown any strikeout upside recently. In fact, his last 4 games, he has 12 combined strikeouts. In 3 of those games, he went 7 or 8 innings. So this is a guy that doesn't have much upside. And this is also a team that strikes out the least in all of baseball. So for me, that's kind of a pass. I like his price at $8,600, but I just don't think he possesses much upside. I'm really not touching any of these cheap guys. We've got Mike Fultonwitz at $5,000 against Miami. Very bad against left-handed batters, but it's a guy that does have some strikeout upside. Struck out 0 batters in his last start, but 8 the time before that against Baltimore. So he's an interesting option if you're paying down. I'm not touching Eddie Butler, Adam Morgan. No thanks for those guys. Kevius Sampson made his 1 start, went 5 innings, gave up 3 earned runs, had 6 Ks. He's a guy that struggles big time with walks, but has a little bit of strikeout upside. So I think he's an okay cheap option, but not a guy that I'm rushing out to play. And then the one other guy I'll consider, but you don't feel good about it, Irvin Santana. He's a guy that's got good stuff, but he's very, very inconsistent. Had that great start against the Angels, and then went negative points against Pittsburgh with 6 earned runs, 8 total, 6 earned, and then gave up 3 earned runs at Toronto, which wasn't a terrible performance considering it was at Toronto. But this is a Cleveland team that, they're very lefty dominant, and he has had troubles at times with lefties. But so far this season, though, 253 WOBA allowed to lefties, but he has allowed 3 home runs in 19 innings. So volatile play, but certainly a guy you consider. Catcher options. I love Wellington Castillo. Been on fire. 7 home runs in his last 10 games. Gets the young Sampson tonight. I think he's a fine play. Jonathan Lucroy gets Jaime Garcia. Garcia's a guy who's been pitching very well. I'm not necessarily a believer that he's as good as his numbers indicate right now. Lucroy, we know, hits lefties very well. So I'm looking at him. Another guy who hits lefties well, Derek Norris at 33. Is a fine play there as well. And then if I'm not paying for these guys, assuming that he's in the lineup tonight, and I anticipate that he will be because he hits lefties very well, James McCann, $2,900. Incredible numbers against lefties in a small sample size this year. 271 ISO, 437 WOBA. He's going to be my favorite play if I'm paying down at catcher. Paul Goldschmidt, $6,000 in Arizona against the young pitcher. He's certainly in play, but tournament option only for me at that price. Joey Votto on the other side in a lefty-lefty matchup. You prefer him against a righty, but he hits lefties fairly well. Other options, you've got Jose Abreu against Jeremy Guthrie. We know Guthrie struggles against lefties. Obviously, Abreu a righty. And He's actually been decent against righties. A 312 WOBA allowed, not great, but right around average. I think Abreu is certainly a play at that price tag. You got to love that. Todd Frazier, first base, third base, of course, $4,700 against lefty in play. I think David Ortiz will probably be your chalk cash game play, though, at $4,200 against Alfredo Simon, who really struggles with lefties, a 387 WOBA on the season. If you're paying down a little bit, Crush Davis against Garrett Richards, going against what I think will be the chalk pitcher, $4,200. He's a great tournament option. Ryan Zimmerman, price starting to creep up, but I'm targeting Eddie Butler with anyone I possibly can, 37 for him. And then Victor Martinez. I mean, if you're not playing David Ortiz, that's the guy you want at first base for cheap. $3,400 against a lefty. He has destroyed lefties throughout his career, especially this season. You got to like him. And then your tournament option down low is going to be Adam LaRoche, $3,100 lefty against Jeremy Guthrie. Homered last night, been struggling recently, but we know he certainly has the upside, and he certainly has the advantage over Jeremy Guthrie tonight. Second base options. Lovey and Kinsler against Wade Miley, $4,300. Another guy who's been hitting lefties well, batting third for the Tigers. You got to like that. Mike Fultonwitz struggles with lefties, you mentioned. D. Gordon, a guy who really hasn't been on base a lot in order to be really aggressive on the base paths, but he's only attempted one stolen base in his last 6 games and was caught stealing last night. So AJ Brzezinski, if he's in the lineup, one of the worst at holding base runners. I know he threw him out last night, but gotta like the stolen base upside there. Brian Dozier against Trevor Bauer at 42, certainly in play there as well. I want as many lefty bats from the Cardinals as I can against Wally Peralta, another guy who struggles with lefties. So Colton Wong at 37 in play there. And then a guy who we wanted to play yesterday but got the day off, Anthony Rendon, $3,600, picking on Eddie Butler. That's a route I'll be going as well. Third base, love Matt Carpenter, another lefty against Peralta, $4,600. He's in a great spot. Miguel Sano against Trevor Bauer. If you're not playing him, Sano been mashing right-handed pitching since he came up. $4,200 for him. Machado, nice tournament option against Garrett Richards in a righty-righty matchup at 42. And then as you're looking down to save a little bit of money, Rendon, also with the third base eligibility. Mike Moustakas is a lefty against Samardzija. He's been struggling, but Samardzija's also struggled against lefties. I don't think he's a bad option. But, the cheap guy I'm going to probably go with here would be Brock Holt if he's leading off against Alfredo Simon. Mentioned Simon struggles with lefties. And $3,300 for Holt, an interesting price. And then your cheap power belongs to Derek Dietrich at $3,200 against Fultonwitz. Really nobody below that I'm going out of my way to play tonight. Shortstop options, there are not a lot of them. I'm trying to save money where I can, but you're looking at the cheap options here. Not a lot stands out. Jose Ramirez against Irvin Santana at $2,600. He's a fine option. Had one hit last night in that big performance by the Indians, but it was a double. Had 5 points. I think he's an okay option if you're going cheap. I don't like really any of the other cheap options. Cesar Hernandez, if he's in the lineup at 28, isn't a bad option. Eric Ibar at 32, or Alcides Escobar at 33. Not in love with any of them. Your tournament option is going to be Ian Desmond, $3,500 against Eddie Butler. I'd say he's more of a cash game play if he had a better lineup spot, but he hasn't recently. And then if you're paying up, you're probably going with Johnny Peralta at $4,200 in a Peralta matchup. Yes, Willie Peralta is better against righties and lefties, but Johnny Peralta is just a very consistent option at shortstop, and not a lot of good options on tonight's slate at shortstop. Outfield options. Bryce Harper against Eddie Butler, Mike Trout against Ubaldo Jimenez. Take your pick there. Both guys coming off of solid performances last night. Harper, 1 for 3 with a couple runs, scored a couple walks. Mike Trout hit his birthday homer, had a couple walks as well, and scored a couple runs. So those are your top 2 options, as they are just about every night. A.J. Pollock, $5,300. Expensive, as a lot of these Arizona bats are, but I think he's a great tournament option at $53. Ryan Braun, J.D. Martinez, both those guys with a ton of power in their matchups. I think I slightly prefer Martinez, but I think he'll be also more highly owned. So Braun, a nice lower ownership guy there. Lorenzo Cain hits lefties very well, but good against righties as well. I'm looking at him in tournaments. One of my favorite plays of the night, though, Justin Upton gets Adam Morgan, a bad lefty, coming off a huge performance last night against Philly, so I really like him a lot. Other options to consider, Marlon Byrd crushes left-handed pitching. He's $4,100 in the desert, so he's certainly in play. Melky Cabrera at $4K, a lefty against Guthrie. Gotta be looking at. Adam Eaton left last night's game. If for some reason he plays, you gotta like him as well. Christian Yelich, a lefty against Fultonwitz. Notice the trend of the night. Lefty, lefty, lefty. I'm gonna get lots of lefties. And then David Peralta, Another cheap guy for Arizona, $3,600 against Sampson. You got to like him. And then as you're looking down cheaper, I like Aaron Hicks against Trevor Bauer at 34 and Chris Davis for tournaments at 33. As far as really cheap guys, not a lot to love. I like Brandon Moss for power against Peralta. Hasn't really shown it since he's come over to the Cardinals, but he's a guy you certainly consider if you're trying to save some salary cap. And then Dom Brown. I like him. He's been hitting well. Been hitting a couple home runs, but Tyson Ross one of the best in the game at limiting home runs, so maybe not quite the upside there tonight. And as far as these really cheap options, nobody really stands out here. Ichiro Suzuki at $2,100 if he's in the lineup. I think it's probably the best of the bare minimum guys for you tonight. And that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.